Alright, welcome back. We are going to be building this 3D billboarded, if you like, progress bar for Godot 4. There are lots of solutions for doing this in Godot 3, but we want one for Godot 4 so we can have some fun. And it'll be able to adjust like so, and you can even make it glow if you want to. So this tutorial is going to be based on this existing plugin. It's in the asset library already for a 3D progress bar. This has been one, up-teen number of tutorials have used the viewport workaround. I've tried that in Godot 4, and maybe it's just me, but it seemed like a pain and it wasn't too friendly anyway. So what I'm going to do is adapt this plugin for Godot 4. And there's a link to the Git as well. So it's based on this script right here, this health bar 3D script. So moving on, we're going to add a new script here. Same idea. And it's going to get the tool attribute. That'll let us use it in the inspector. And then we're going to give it a class name. And the class name will make it show up if you try to add a node. So if I save that, and I were to go up here and try and add a node and search for that, there's the custom object. So what this is going to need are a few variables up here. One of the things we're going to need to keep track of is the percentage full that the bar is. And we're going to have just a node 3D to hold the meshes that we're going to put in here that are going to be the progress bar. So mesh 3D. I'm sorry, that needs to be a node 3D. It's just like I said, a parent to the meshes. So under this is what I want to be a mesh instance 3D. On Rady, all right. So every tool needs a initialization function, which is just init here. We're gonna set that variable up here, these variables, to instantiate them. Equal node 3D new. And the under is going to be the outline, basically. The progress is going to overlap, and the under is going to be just a little bigger, so it looks like it's outlining the progress bar to give it a flare. Same thing with progress. Come on. IntelliSense is too slow. There we go. So now we're going to add the origin to the scene, a scene tree, and then we're going to, that's just a node 3D, and we're going to add the meshes as children, so we have just something we can scale the whole thing with. So same thing here. Awesome. Okay, now we need to actually set the mesh. So like this mesh instance isn't the actual mesh. This is the mesh is a property of it, and we do that by setting is equal to a new whatever mesh you're putting. In this case, it's a box mesh. Same thing with progress. Progress mesh, yeah. So if you're wondering to yourself, like, how on earth was I supposed to know that you could do that? Or like what is available in the API? So reading through the documentation is the unpleasant answer. To give an example though of what might make this a little less painful. So here's a mesh instance. Over here are the properties that you can set. And you see where it says property mesh, the lowercase, that's what you'd want to put in code, regardless of how they display it here. And over here, you can add any of these meshes. Now, be aware that some of the properties are different on some of these, but in our case, we're going to add a box mesh. And then, then you could set this the size, whatever you needed to do. So this is essentially what we're going to be doing with this progress bar. We're going to create the box and we're, set it to a default size, something like this. So we're going to give it a way to override the material when we set the color and all that. So material override is how we do that. And this is one of those, the class name changed from Godot 3, which is one of the things that broke it in the original one. So coding is boring. So let's try it out before doing any work. So we got a box. Hey, look at that, look at that. No, uh, box, no, where's my mesh? Stand by. Okay, invalid call, non-existent function, add shield. Nope, didn't happen. Okay, okay. So that was totally Godot's fault. So let's try that again. Hey, there we go. So now we've got this excellent box mesh, but we need to do more than that. So cool, that's a start. What we need as well are the variables. So the properties on this script that we're going to be able to allow to be set over here when we do add it to make it a configurable progress bar. I'm going to go through and add them. This is going to be boring, so I'll speed this up and then I'll come back and explain these a bit. Okay, cool. So a lot of these are pretty obvious, but just to go through them. So min and max value, like the smallest and largest value, we're going to allow to set values in the progress bar, just the value we're starting at, like so we're starting full in this case. The color we're going to go towards if we're empty, full, red and green are standard. Obviously, we can mess with those. Black outline. Then we're going to have the size. Now, the size is just the X, Y, and Z size of the the cube, like we just saw added. So this is just going to give it a default size that's kind of long, skinny, almost flat, whatever. This I added from the original script. It's this way we're gonna when we're resizing the the under versus the progress. By default, it would just size both of them together and shrink the bar physically as it changes color and indicates diminishing progress or health. So I'm going to add this as a flag basically, where if you want to, you can leave the empty bar up. So if you wanted to actually show the bar as opposed to making the whole thing disappear, this will provide that option when we implement it. So one of the changes to Godot 4 is this, the syntax when you're doing, getters and setters on these exported variables. So for those not familiar, export just means it's going to be visible in the inspector. This is obviously the variable name after the equals sign, which is optional. So what I could do, I could put a hint here and say float um, and be done with it. Or what I'm doing here is I'm actually giving it a value which will implicitly be suggesting a type. Whatever you put in here, whatever you name it, is just going to be the value that was passed when you changed it in the inspector. So you need another colon here uh, for the set method. So what we're going to do is first set the variable itself here equal to the value that was passed in, which is here. That's why I'm naming it differently. It probably wouldn't matter, but it can be awfully confusing. So we're going to also create some methods to set this. So what we need to do here is set the percent full, which we can determine, by the values that exist in all of these variables. Then we need to set the mesh sizes. And like I say, we're seeing the red squigglies because I haven't created these methods yet, but that's next. And then we're going to set the progress color. So let's create those methods now. Go down here, set %full. So all we're doing is setting the variable. Now, as a reminder, that's the variable we defined up here. That's going to equal. Now this is going to be a little more than just divide the number by the max value, and I'll explain why. So we're going to do value minus the minimum value. Reason is to account for negatives. People might want to have negative values for whatever reason in their game. So let's say the minimum value is a negative value. So like, I guess picture like 5 minus 0, right? So the full range, I guess to get to the bottom is 5 here. But if they put a negative value in here, and then you want a negative 10, then this will give us 15. So that'll give you the full distance to the bottom if we do that. And then we're going to divide that similarly by the max value minus the min value. And same idea there is we're going to have, this is going to give us the full range from the, if it's negative 100 to 2000, it'll give us 2100 to give us the full possible size. And then that will give us the percentage accounting for that. Even so, I'm going to clamp it because you never know. If someone starts really messing around and trying to break something, you could end up, I don't know what this is going to do if we put the min higher than the max. It could mess it up. So the clamp function, just like you see up here, you put in the variable that you're clamping, the minimum and maximum, and it's going to keep, like if this value provides something outside that range, it's going to clamp it to a minimum or maximum. I'm putting it on another line just to be clear about it. So I should actually, so clamp, this whole thing is the value we're clamping. And then we're going to clamp it between 0 and 100 because it's a percentage. And there we go. That method's done. So what else are we going to do? So that'll set the percentage full. Now it's red squiggly's gone. So now we're going to set the mesh sizes. And the way we're going to do that, I have a couple of things to consider here. So first thing here is this. I'm going to create a variable for outline offset. Outline offset. That's what I said, yeah. And that's going to be, basically it's going to be the outline size that we defined somewhere. Outline color. Did I not put that in there? I didn't put that. So we're going to use that outline size that I clearly defined right here. Close your eyes. This outline size. Okay, so and that'll just be like the spacing. Think of like a margin is what it's going to look like in the end with the under mesh is going to be that much bigger on all sizes, or not on all sizes, or not on all sides. Man, anyway, so what I'm going to do here is add this max function to set it to the outline size or 0.01, whichever is bigger. Reason for that is so if we have the two box meshes and they're exactly on top of each other, I think we all know that's going to not look very good. So this will give it a little buffer to make sure it's not laying it right on it and not actually touching it. So next is going to be this X size offset. We'll see why we call it that in a minute. So that's going to be how full is the bar. So this is the maximum size. We're going to shrink that by using the percentage. So that's going to be the size X value times %full. And now we want to set the mesh size. So the X, I'm going to start with the X coordinate, which is going to be special because we're going to have to mess with it a little bit. We're going to have the X size offset. Now this is what we just said. So this is, if we just were doing everything vanilla, this would be it. Like it's, this percentage of the full size. That's all that is. But what we want to do is clamp this as well. We're going to clamp the X size offset between 0 and the maximum size. That's going to sound logical, but we want to add one more thing here. So the maximum size minus the outline offset that we just figured out up here. So the reason we want to do that is so like when it gets up to 100%, we don't want it to be the full size. We want it to um, still show the under mesh behind it, so we see that outline. So this is going to say make at 100%, make it the full size, but shrink it a little bit so we still see that outline by however much that needs to be. So that whole thing right there is the x of the vector 3. If you wanted to do a vertical progress bar, you could do this on the y value instead. Nothing wrong with that either. But the other two values are just going to be size y and size z as they, as they are up here. And you can set those obviously. Now we want to set the under mesh, which is the outline. It'll be behind, um, the progress mesh. So we want to know if we're not, again, exclamation point is negating. So if we're not keeping the empty bar, this variable here, this means we're going to shrink the entire thing. We're not going to have an empty bar remaining when they have 0 health left. We're just going to shrink the whole object. But if you if you want to do that, we'll just do under mesh size y, and this is where we're going to add that outline offset. So then under mesh size whatever, I don't know why I'm doing them in this order. I think it's because of how I was thinking about that outline just in my brain such that it is. And a similar thing we're going to do here, the x size of the outline is going to be the x size offset plus the outline that we do want to see. Again, this is the mesh behind the progress mesh, so it'll be peeking out behind it. That's what it's really going to do. 0, but clamp it between 0 and the maximum size. And else, so meaning if we do want to keep the empty bar, then we don't need to we don't need to size the X down with the progress bar, which is what this line right here is doing. It's, scaling the outline with the progress. So this is going to be the same, but in this case, we're just going to keep this the same size all the time, which is size X. Again, this value that gets set up here. So that will take care of the second method up here. Now we need set progress color. We're also going to need set under color, but we'll get there. In fact, I'm going to write both of them here because they're simple and they relate. Color. So this is where we created those material overrides in the initialization. Where'd it go? Here. So we're going to set these materials to the colors that we pick here, the empty and the full color, and the outline color. So the under is just the outline, so that's always going to be whatever that outline color is. So even if this is not going to change in a practical sense while someone's playing the game or while the character is being damaged, whatever it is, we do need to update it whenever we're doing any of this stuff in the inspector, because they can change this in the inspector at any time. So think of it that way. Same thing for the progress. And this is where you know, we get the progression from the empty to the full color. We start with the empty color and lerp, which is just linear interpolation. It used to, like Godot 3, it was actually written out linear interpolation and snake case. So now it's lerpolation. So this means we're going from the empty color to the full color with a step of the value. So like the value, if it's 5 out of 10, we're going to be halfway between the empty color and the full color. So what we've done so far, we've basically got the construct set up. So now we need to just call those methods whenever we set these values up here. So now we have to basically anything that is affected by changing the max value and any of these other things, we're going to, we're going to have to update. So all these are going to kind of follow this format, except now we need the max value. Now again, we're setting this variable to the one that's passed in here, equal to the value. Love autocomplete, love it. Then we're going to call those methods. Set mesh sizes and set progress color, because we're not changing the undercolor in this case. Okay, so the value, and don't do like I just did. Make sure you when you actually add the setter or the getter, you need the colon. Probably should just make a general update method, but they differ ever so slightly, so it's kind of annoying. So anyway, set value. So one thing you want to watch for here is when we're setting the max value. Remember that the max value gets divided by when we calculate percentage. So we don't want it to be 0. So that's a gotcha. We're going to stop right here. So if the max value is 0, we're going to say no. There we go. Oh, and return. Very important. So that'll actually break it out so it doesn't try to do any updating and break things. This, man, I'm batting 1,000. This should be indented, obviously. So if that doesn't happen, then we can continue. Do this. So there we go. And so those are the things we need to update whenever we change those values. So now let's handle these billboards. These are a little tedious just because of the way we deal with enums. So these are enums that are built into Godot. These like the billboard value and the shaded value, they're stored as enums, which basically means it's numerical values corresponding to these values. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and for shaded down here, this is 0, 1, 2, 3. It's important because you didn't create this enum, it's in Godot, so you need to put this in the same order as Godot's enum, and that's another one you could look at in the inspector. So just bear that in mind. So we need to set the value, and the way you can do this is match val. So this is kind of like a case statement. So if it's 0, we're going to set the billboard, which is this variable here that we're setting. We're going to set it equal to, this one's fun to find. So where this is located is a standard material 3D billboard disabled. This is that built-in enum of Godot's. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the under and the progress to that billboard method. You wouldn't want them to be mixed, obviously. IntelliSense fail down. There we go. So and then we're just gonna set that equal to this variable since we just set it here, so we can just set it to that variable. that's the template. So now we have to do that for those other values. This is why it's a little tedious, but we can kind of shortcut this, copy this format, and then just set this to one's enabled, and then that'll carry through here. Two, same thing, except now we want fixed Y, I believe is the the Y billboard, which just means that it will, if you're doing this, I actually have it here. Yeah, so if you're going around, so an example of it is Y billboard. If you're going in the, in this direction, it does not preserve billboard. It just does it going this way. So some cases you might want that, and enabled is just no matter where you're facing, it's going to face you. So now we need to do the same thing for shaded, ad nauseum. So shading mode unshaded, and this is typically what you'll use for a progress bar because you want to see it regardless of your environment. So the light will not affect it, and for that reason it should be defaulted to 0, not 1. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so one thing left to do is, so up here when we first initialized this, we added all this stuff to the scene. Let's set those default values by calling the methods in the initialization. So some of these I can get just here, cheap. So we're gonna need percent full mesh sizes. We're gonna have set under color. And I don't think it's worth creating a separate method for those enums, so I'm just gonna put the under material override billboard build. So once again, taking the default value from the exported variable here. So it's just setting it to whatever, since we set a default value down here, it can just pick that up. Progress, same deal. Shaded, same thing. There we go. So let's give this a try. Hey, now it's looking more interesting. Okay, so we can see here the default values enabled. So I'm going to disable it just so we can kind of get a look and fully understand what's going on here. What's going on here is I'm only setting it on the progress bar and not the underbar, so bad me. So when you try to set billboard mode to material override, that doesn't work. It's material override billboard mode. There. Now everything will run perfectly. Once more. All right, so now I will disable this. Okay, that's better. So I'm going to disable billboard just so we can kind of see what I was talking about before, where we have the overlapping rectangles, or like I said, prisms, boxes, whatever. So if we take the Z size, we can accentuate that. Okay, so as we mess with the Z size, you can see here, like this black one is the under mesh, and we make it slightly larger in these dimensions, but not in the Z dimensions, so that we can see an outline. So I'll put that back to whatever, 0.01, can be whatever you like. And so then the size here, the reason we use a percentage and we calculate it with the math on the min and max value, so that way it doesn't have to be just 0 to 1. I did leave it that way because it's easy to uh, drag this back and forth. So, if you set it to like 1 to 10,000, you'll be here all day just trying to see the effect. You could export a range, but then you can't dynamically do that to my knowledge anyway. So this is just, you can set this as you like, but this gives us something to look at. So the only other thing to do, I mean, this is the bar, and you can adjust it and you can adjust the colors however you want. Maybe something a little less conventional. Got the teal going here. So the reason I used this project from the previous tutorial is because we're already kind of uh, asking for a progress bar here by messing with the HP like we did before. So as a refresher, this will update from that light database. It'll read and write values from the database and update this text. So let's just finish that effect by adding the progress bar in with that. So the max value we would set the same, but let's just do it all in the code. So we did that in the, I think the abstraction layer here. Yep, this. So right here is where we set the HP text. So now we need to get this health bar 3D node. I already set it to get it by the unique name, so we don't have to put the path. So all we need to do is get the progress bar. And so this being on that character that we created before. And then we just have to set those, oops. Now we just have to set those values. So these, now we're just accessing those properties that we created over here, these properties. So let's set the max value to the character max. Now this time we're not going to convert it to a string, of course, because we're setting a variable this time, not text on the screen. And then the progress bar value equal to the HP. And since we handle all that percentage calculation stuff in the methods we put in here, that will take care of itself. So let's run this. Now see that kind of adjusted. Now we are damaging, once again, the poor player who is completely defenseless, but this is too much fun. After all this coding, I may have to load this a few dozen times and play with this, but until next time.